Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about how you can protect any prototypes that are kept with your supplier. So for example, any molds or masters that you may have paid for. I've had customers come to me where they may have decided to either change or add on a new jewelry supplier. And they've asked me how they are able to get back any of their molds or masters from them. And because every manufacturer works a little differently, it can be a little bit of a dilemma if you're not too sure. I mean, in theory, if you have your designs in their possession, you should get them back, especially if they've been manufacturing the designs exclusively for you, then they don't have any use to keep them anymore. I just want to share with you a few tips that you may want to apply so that you know you are protected from the start. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kim, owner of Thai Design Distributors, a third-generation family business since 1975, where we own a manufacturing plant in Thailand specializing in producing sterling silver and gold jewelry exclusively for designers. And we've always had our headquarters in London and now expanded to include a sales and support office in the US. Please check out my introduction video. It explains more about my background in the jewelry trade and the purpose of this channel. So let me give you a typical example of where I've had a customer come to see me, or within the last year with COVID, they've posted me some samples so that I can give them an estimated price to make them. After I've done that, and they're happy for me to make a sample exactly the same as theirs, I would ask them, but if this is your design, where are your molds and your masters? Because if I had that mold and master, I could just do a quick cast of it and there's your sample. So no extra costs involved other than the cost of making the sample. And that's when they're like, well, their previous supplier has the mold or the master and they don't know if they can get it back. Now, for whatever reason, they're wanting to change manufacturers or add a new one. It's their own deal. That's their decision, whatever. But for me, I ask that question to them because I want to be as cost efficient as possible. And if we only have a sample, there would be some development fees involved if they wanted us to make a new one for them. We could use the sample as a master and then make a mold of it, but then there would be casting shrinkage. Or we may have to go back to the starting board and create a new CAD, which would mean a 3D resin print, potentially a new master and a new mold, which, as you can imagine, will all add up. If we had the mold or master, we've cut more than half of that process. It's cheaper, quicker, happier. So what I want to emphasize here is that some suppliers can get a bit funny about giving back your mold or master. Yes, they are your exclusive design, so no, they should not have any reason whatsoever in wanting to keep hold of them. But by asking for them back, what you're basically implying is that, look, I'm potentially going to go somewhere else with my designs and have it made with another supplier. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a sensitive topic. And I'll be honest, but I've had customers where they just let the supplier keep their prototype designs and they pay to get a whole new set made because they just don't want to upset the supplier by requesting for the molds or masters back. So I get that, but sometimes the supplier will send them back and sometimes they won't. So to avoid any misconceptions or potentially any challenges here, there are a few tips that you can apply. When you're starting the communication with the supplier, ask them that when it comes to any prototypes that would need to be invested into the development or production of your jewelry, who pays for it? If you're paying for these, then those are your assets regardless of where they are kept in possession. So for example, in Thai Design Standard NDA, we're clear from the start and I state that I will charge customers for any prototypes of their jewelry and that it's theirs in ownership. But obviously I need to keep them at my manufacturing plant because we need to use them for the production of their orders. Now, you might run into a difficulty where a supplier may say that they would usually pay for the prototypes, but they're fine for you to pay for them instead. But then when they give you the cost for all of them, it may turn out to be really expensive. When it comes to charging customers for things like molds, master, all those development fees, I more or less set similar prices for those development fees, which I'll talk about in another video real soon, because I know that a lot of people are curious to know how much they may have to spend upfront before any production can be processed. However, manufacturers all work differently and they all have different terms. So if any of the prototypes that they quote to you seem really expensive, but they can justify those costs, then fair enough. The question is, do you want to pay for them? And if you're prepared to, then make sure you have this in writing and it's documented. Alternatively, you can always put in your NDA. Again, I stressed this in a previous video that you need to have an NDA in place, that in the event of you wishing to have your design prototypes returned, then you have the option at a later date to request for them, and that you'll be responsible for paying for them plus the shipping fees at that point in time. Explore the different avenues and negotiate in a way that is fair for both parties. My point is that you don't want to rush too fast too soon. Protect yourself first and make sure it's clear from the start what your rights are, so that if you ever get into a scenario where somewhere down the line things aren't working out with your supplier, then you can plan your next steps accordingly, knowing whether you are or aren't able to get those design prototypes returned back to you. Now, the scenario I just gave to you where I might ask my customer whether they can retrieve their masters or molds is fine if the customer wants to basically replicate that exact same design. In other words, there's no defects on the sample and they want it produced exactly the same. But let's say the sample isn't perfect. Then for me, as their new supplier, the molds and masters of that design isn't any use to me because the customer isn't happy with the sample anyway. So in which case we would look into different options, such as whether we can still use the same sample as the master by amending or tempering with the sample to give it the shape or the detail that the customer wants. Of course, it depends on the design. Or like I said earlier, we might end up having to make a brand new CAD for them, or they can go away and make a CAD for us. But let's say you're in their shoes and you have a defected sample that someone did for you and they charged you for the mold master and maybe even for the CAD design and the 3D printing. Then you should, in theory, get your money back, or at least part of it. So it could be that the CAD and the 3D print was perfect and you approved those, but the master and mold wasn't perfect, and therefore the casted sample was also affected. Then you should make sure that you have the CAD file and that resin, because those are valuable, especially for your next supplier. They could use a CAD file or resin to make a new sample, but you should make sure that you have a refund on the master, mold, and the sample, because those didn't come out the way you expected. These are just things to consider when you're working with a new supplier. I know it's easy to sometimes get wrapped up in the excitement of things and wanting to get a sample made quickly, but I would just advise you to take it slowly from the start and just be clear with the supplier on what each party's rights are. Guys, I hope you found that helpful and interesting. Any questions you have, be sure to drop it in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, subscribe for all my latest videos that are still to come. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.